The 80-year debt cycle, 1944-2008. The final bubble pops in 2025. There is a hidden clock ticking inside the global economy, and it resets exactly every 80 years. The last time it hit midnight was 1944. Do the math. That means right now, we are not just living through a recession or a rough market. We are standing at the mathematical end of a lifespan. This is a pattern that has destroyed three global superpowers before us: the Dutch in the 1600s, the British in the 1900s, and now, the American system. If you feel like the ground is constantly moving beneath your feet, you are right. The system isn't broken, it is simply finishing its design. It is in the liquidation phase. By the end of this video, you won't just understand why your grocery bill feels like robbery, or why your savings are losing value while you sleep. You will see the exact timeline of what happens next. Three empires made the same mistake. Yours is about to be the fourth. Every empire in history has whispered the same four words right before it collapsed. This time is different. It never is. To understand where you are standing today, you have to zoom out. Way out. You have to look at the map of money itself. The title of global superpower is not a permanent crown. It is a rented title, and the lease is almost up. Look back at the 1600s. The Dutch guilder was the world's reserve currency. If you wanted to trade spice, silk, or wood anywhere on earth, you did it in guilders. Amsterdam was the center of the financial universe. They thought their golden age would last forever. But they got rich, they got expensive, and they lost their competitive edge. So, they started borrowing to maintain their lifestyle. When the debt became too heavy, the guilder collapsed. Who picked up the crown? The British. For over 100 years, the British pound was as good as gold. They ruled the waves. The sun never set on their empire. They controlled global trade. But then came the wars, World War I and World War II. To fight them, Britain had to borrow money on a scale the human mind couldn't comprehend. They spent their wealth fighting enemies, and they spent their future paying for the peace. By 1944, the British Empire was bankrupt, and the pound sterling lost its place at the head of the table. Who took the seat? The United States. The dollar. This is the cycle. It is the heartbeat of history. One empire rises on hard money and production. It becomes wealthy. It becomes lazy. It starts to borrow. It overextends its military. And finally, it prints money to cover the bills. The Dutch did it. The British did it. And now, the United States is doing exactly the same thing. This isn't a political opinion. This is a balance sheet. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, the US dollar was crowned king because America held 80% of the world's gold. The dollar was a receipt for gold. It was a promise. But look at us now. That promise was broken a long time ago. We are no longer the factory of the world. We are the debtor of the world. We don't export steel. We export inflation. The scary part isn't that empires fall. It's how they deny it is happening until the very last second. The leaders always have an excuse. They call it modern monetary theory. They call it quantitative easing. They use complex words to hide a simple crime, debasement. They borrow in times of peace to create the illusion of prosperity, and they print in times of trouble to save their own necks. You, the citizen, pay for both. You pay in the taxes taken from your paycheck, and you pay in the value stolen from your savings account. The Dutch merchant in 1780 didn't think his money would vanish. The British shopkeeper in 1945 didn't think his empire was over. And you, sitting here in the 2020s, probably think the dollar is invincible. But the map tells a different story. The timeline is undeniable. We are roughly 80 years from the moment the dollar took the throne. The clock is striking midnight. Every empire had the same excuse. Every empire had the same hubris. And every empire ended the same way. But to understand exactly how painful this end can be, and to see what it does to a normal family, we need to look at the last time this happened. We need to go back to London. Imagine waking up one morning, walking to the bakery, and realizing the money in your pocket is worth 30% less than it was while you were sleeping. That isn't dystopian fiction. That is exactly what happened to the citizens of the greatest empire on earth on September 21, 1931. To understand our future, we must look at the British past. Before World War I, Britain was the United States of its day. The pound sterling was the rock. If you were a prudent man in 1910, you didn't buy stocks. That was gambling. You bought British government consolsa, bonds. It was the safest investment in human history. It was a contract with God and the King. But then came the war. Britain won the battlefield, but they lost the bank. To fight Germany, they borrowed astronomical sums. They spent their gold reserves. They tapped out their allies. By the time the guns fell silent, the empire was drowning in debt. This is where the pattern kicks in. This is the stage called the illusion of normalcy. For the next 10 years, British politicians tried to pretend nothing had changed. They tried to keep the value of the pound high to maintain their prestige. They imposed austerity. They crushed the coal miners with low wages to keep prices down. They refused to admit the math didn't work. But debt is like gravity. You can ignore it for a while, but eventually, you hit the ground. In 1931, the market stopped believing the lie. Investors started pulling their gold out of London. The Bank of England panicked. And on that Sunday in September, the government went on the radio and did the unthinkable. They suspended the gold standard. Overnight, the pound collapsed. Now, think about the human cost. Think about a man named Arthur, a veteran and a father. He was a man who spent his life saving 10% of his wages, putting it into safe government bonds for his retirement. He did everything society told him to do. He was responsible. He was loyal. And in one weekend, the government decided that to save the system, Arthur had to be sacrificed. His savings didn't disappear. The number on the paper stayed the same. But what that money could buy vanished. The cost of imported food skyrocketed. His pension was gutted by inflation. The empire shifted the burden of its debt onto the backs of its savers. This is the most important lesson you can learn from history. When a government is forced to choose between defaulting on its debt or destroying its currency, it will destroy the currency every single time. Why? Because defaulting on debt is visibly a national shame. But destroying the currency, that is subtle, that is complex. They can blame speculators or global headwinds. They didn't default on the bonds, they defaulted on the money itself. The British Empire didn't end with an explosion. It ended with a whimper of devaluation. It ended with the middle class quietly becoming the lower class, while the politicians gave speeches about temporary measures. If this sounds familiar, it's because you have seen a softer, slower version of it in your own life. You just know it by a different name, the cost of living crisis. But the British took decades to fall. We are moving much faster. Because while the British had a debt problem, they didn't have the technology to accelerate it. We do. And to see how the modern version of this trap works, we don't need to look back 100 years. We only need to look back to 2008. We are told that 2008 was a once-in-a-lifetime crisis. We are told that the smartest people in the room stepped in, saved the world, and fixed the problem. That is a lie. They didn't fix the problem. They didn't cure the patient. They just put him on life support and sent the bill to your children. 2008 was not a random accident. In the 80-year cycle, 2008 was the moment the debt burden finally became too heavy for the economy to carry. It was nature trying to heal itself. It was the system trying to flush out the bad debt, the bad bets, and the reckless banks. It was supposed to be the forest fire that clears the dead wood so new trees can grow. But the architects of our system refused to let it burn. Instead of letting the reckless banks fail, the Federal Reserve and the government did something unprecedented. They printed trillions of dollars out of thin air and injected it directly into the veins of the financial system. They called it quantitative easing because that sounds scientific. But let us call it what it really is: counterfeiting legal tender to cover up a gambling loss. This was the turning point. This was the moment the American economy stopped being a free market and started being a zombie economy. Look at the scoreboard. Who was saved and who was sacrificed? The banks that caused the crash got bailed out. Their executives kept their bonuses. Their shareholders were protected. But you, the regular American, you got something very different. Because they printed so much money to prop up the system, the price of assets disconnected from reality. Think back to the year 2000. For the average American family, a home cost about 3 or 4 times the median annual salary. It was a stretch, but it was possible. It was the American dream. Look at today. In many cities, a home now costs 8, 9, or 10 times the median salary. Did houses get 3 times better? No. Your money got 3 times weaker. By suppressing interest rates to zero to keep the zombie banks alive, they forced the price of everything you need: housing, stocks, land to the moon. This created a permanent wall between the haves and the have-nots. If you owned assets before 2008, you got rich. If you rely on a paycheck to survive, you got buried. This isn't a bug in the software. This is the system working exactly as designed. The social contract, the idea that if you work hard, you can get ahead, was torn up in 2008. The message from the system was clear: risk is for the poor. Safety is for the rich. And here is the terrifying part: 2008 was just the heart attack. The doctors administered a shot of adrenaline to keep the patient walking. But they never fixed the heart. Now, 16 years later, the adrenaline has worn off. The debt is higher than ever. The leverage is higher than ever. And the tools they used in 2008, lowering rates and printing money, are gone. They used all their ammunition on the warning shot. We are now staring at the funeral. The same pattern is now playing out at the level of the entire system, not just the housing market, but the sovereign debt market itself. The United States government is now the subprime borrower. But to see where this goes next, you need a framework. You need to see the mechanism under the hood. Complex economies collapse in simple ways, and it always happens in 6 distinct stages. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. And when it comes to money, it rhymes because human nature never changes. Greed, fear, and the desire for something for nothing drive every economy into the ground eventually. Ray Dalio, one of the world's most successful investors, studied this for decades. He found that every single long-term debt cycle follows the same 6-step script. You need to memorize this. Once you see these 6 stages, you will never look at a news headline the same way again. Stage 1 is hard money. In the beginning, there is little debt. Money is gold, or silver, or something tangible. It has intrinsic value. You cannot print it. If you want to buy something, you have to exchange something of equal value. The economy is honest, but it is slow. Stage 2 is paper claims. Society realizes that carrying heavy metal is inconvenient, so banks issue paper notes. These notes are claims on the gold in the vault. At this stage, trust is high. For every paper dollar in circulation, there is a dollar of gold in the vault. Stage 3 is the debt explosion. This is the seductive phase. Bankers realize a secret: not everyone comes for their gold at the same time. So, they start lending out more paper claims than they have gold. They lend to businesses, they lend to governments. This creates a boom. It feels fantastic. Construction starts. Wages rise. People feel wealthy because they are spending borrowed money. This is the Roaring Twenties. This is the 1990s. Stage 4 is the asset bubble. The debt grows faster than real wealth. The ratio of paper to gold stretches to a breaking point. People start borrowing money just to gamble on assets, stocks, houses, tulips, believing prices will never go down. The disconnect between financial wealth and real wealth becomes absurd. This was 1929. This was 2007. Usually, this is where the crash happens. The bubble bursts. The debt is wiped out, and the cycle resets painfully. But in a fiat system, the government has a secret weapon. They refuse to let the bust happen. Stage 5 is the printing press. This is the trap. When the bubble pops, the central bank steps in. They can't pay the debt, so they print the money to cover it. They lower interest rates to zero and flood the system with liquidity. It looks like they saved the day. The stock market recovers. The economy stabilizes. But they didn't solve the debt, they just diluted the currency. They stole value from every dollar in existence to fill the hole in the banking system. We have spent the last 15 years living in stage 5. The problem with stage 5 is that it is addictive. Once you start printing to pay bills, you cannot stop. If you stop, the system collapses. So you print more, which leads inevitably to the final lock. Stage 6 is the flight to assets. This is the point of no return. The public and foreign nations have finally realized that paper money will never be paid back in real value. They realize the government is choosing inflation over default. So, people stop holding cash. They run for the exits. They dump the currency to buy anything that will hold value: gold, land, foreign currencies, and commodities. When this starts, it creates a feedback loop. The more people sell the dollar, the more the central bank has to print to keep the system afloat. This is the end of the Dutch guilder. This is the end of the British pound. And right now, If you look at the price of gold hitting all-time highs and central banks around the world dumping treasuries, you realize we are crossing the threshold. We breezed through stage 4 in 2008. We have exhausted stage 5. There is only one stage left. And the scary part? The data shows we aren't just approaching it. We are already in it. Mathematics has no politics. It doesn't care who sits in the Oval Office. It doesn't care about your feelings, your party, or your hopes. Mathematics is ruthless. And right now, the math says we have hit the wall. If you take the 6-stage framework we just discussed and overlay it onto the United States economy in 2025, the picture is not just alarming, it is undeniable. We are no longer approaching the end of the cycle. We are living through the liquidation phase. Look at the data. It took the United States 100 years to accumulate its first $1 trillion of debt. Today, we are adding $1 trillion of debt roughly every 100 days. That is not growth. That is terminal velocity. That is the graph going vertical. But the debt number itself isn't what kills the empire. It's the cost of carrying that debt. For the first time in history, the United States government is spending more money on interest payments than it spends on its entire military. We are spending more to pay for the mistakes of the past than we are to defend our future. This creates a death spiral. The government has to borrow more money just to pay the interest on the money it already borrowed. It is paying the Visa bill with a MasterCard. This is why you feel like the system is breaking. Because it is. The Federal Reserve is now trapped in a box they built themselves. And this box has no exit. To fight inflation, they need to keep interest rates high. But if they keep interest rates high, the interest payments on the national debt become so large that they bankrupt the government. However, if they lower interest rates to save the government, inflation explodes, and the currency becomes worthless. They have to choose between bankruptcy or hyperinflation. There is no door number 3. And the rest of the world knows it. Why do you think central banks around the world have been buying gold at the fastest pace in over 50 years? Why are countries joining the BRICS alliance? Why are they trading oil in currencies other than the dollar? They aren't doing it to be mean. They are doing it because they can do the math, too. They see that the United States is in stage 6. They are quietly moving toward the exit before the theater catches fire. This explains the chaos you see in the news. The wars, the political division, the desperate headline. It is the sound of an empire trying to hold on to a global order that it can no longer afford. This isn't a rough patch. This is the mathematical certainty of compound interest meeting a finite world. But here is the thing that usually gets left out of the history books. When a system like this collapses, the pain is not shared equally. While you are watching your savings dissolve and your purchasing power vanish, there is a specific group of people who are doing just fine. In fact, they are doing better than fine. This crash isn't an accident to them. For the architects of this system, this isn't a tragedy. It's a harvest. In every financial collapse, wealth is never actually destroyed. It is simply transferred. And right now, the greatest wealth transfer in human history is happening. The tragedy is that it is transferring away from you. There is a myth that when the economy crashes, everyone loses. That is false. The system we live in was designed by a specific group of people, for a specific group of people, and you are not in that group. To understand who is doing this to you, you have to understand a concept called the Cantillon effect. It is named after an economist from the 1700s, Richard Cantillon. He discovered a simple, brutal truth: money is not neutral. When the government prints $1 trillion to save the economy, they don't drop it from helicopters equally onto everyone's front lawn. The new money enters the system at the top. It goes to the too big to fail banks first. Then it goes to the mega corporations. Then it goes to the hedge funds. These are the architects. Because they get the money first, they get to spend it before prices go up. They use this free, printed money to buy up real assets, houses, stocks, companies at yesterday's prices. By the time that money trickles down to you, in the form of your paycheck, the damage has already been done. The extra money in the system has driven up the price of gas, milk, and rent. They got the purchasing power. You got the inflation. This explains why, during the pandemic, billionaires added trillions to their net worth, while Main Street businesses shut down forever. It wasn't luck. It was mechanics. The architects have built a heads I win, tails you lose machine. When the economy is booming, they keep the profits. They call it capitalism. When the economy crashes because of their own gambling, they demand a bailout. They call it systemic stability. They privatize the gains, and they socialize the losses. You, the taxpayer, are the insurance policy for the reckless gambling of the elite. You are the backstop. Think about credit scores. They track every mistake you make. If you miss a payment, your score drops, and your life gets harder. You are held accountable for every penny. But when a major bank fails because of gross negligence, the rules change. The Fed changes the ledger. The debt is erased or absorbed by the public. They profit either way. You bear all the risk. This creates a permanent trap. You are working for a currency that is being debased to bail out the people who own the assets you can no longer afford to buy. If you are working for wages, you are running up a down escalator. If you own assets, you are riding the elevator. This division isn't accidental. It is the architecture of the final stage of the empire. But let us stop looking at the billionaires for a second and look at your kitchen table. Because this global theft isn't just a line on a chart. It is the reason your family feels smaller, more stressed, and more fragile than ever before. This isn't just about stock markets or geopolitical chess games. This is about why you can't afford a house when your father could on a single income. We need to bring this 80-year cycle down from the clouds and put it right on your kitchen table. Because the most dangerous lie you are told is that your financial struggle is your own fault. You are told that if you just skipped the latte, or worked harder, or hustled more, you would be fine. But look at the reality. In the 1950s, the start of this cycle, a single income could support a family of 4, buy a home, own a car, and save for retirement. Today, in many major cities, two full-time incomes can barely cover the rent and daycare. Did American workers get lazier? No. In fact, productivity has skyrocketed. You are working harder and more efficiently than any generation before you. The problem isn't you. The problem is the money you are working for. Every time the government prints money to bail out a bank or fund a war, they are diluting your labor. Think about the grocery store. You have noticed it. The box of cereal is smaller, but the price is higher. The quality of the meat is lower, but the bill is heavier. They call it shrinkflation. But that is just a fancy word for currency devaluation. The food didn't get more expensive. Your money got weaker. It takes more of your dying dollars to buy the same amount of calories. This is the invisible tax. No politician ever voted for it. You never signed up for it. But you pay it every single day at the checkout counter. And look at your retirement. This is the cruelest trap of all. You are told to save, to put your money in a 401k, to park it in the stock market. But why? Why does a nurse or a teacher have to become a part-time hedge fund manager just to survive old age? Because saving cash is a guaranteed loss. If you put $100 under your mattress in 2020, it has already lost 20% of its buying power. So the system forces you to gamble. It forces you into the casino. You have to put your money into the stock market just to keep up with inflation. They have turned your retirement nest egg into liquidity for their financial games. You are running faster and faster just to stay in the same place because the floor is moving backward. The anxiety you feel when you open the mailbox, the fear that one medical emergency could wipe you out of that, isn't paranoia. That is your intuition telling you that the safety net has been sold. You are living in the late stages of an empire that has broken its promise to its people. So, stop blaming yourself for being tired. You are trying to build a life on a foundation of sand, while the tide is coming in. But here is the good news. Now that you see the sand, and now that you see the tide, you can decide to move. You cannot stop the cycle, but you can step out of its path. The system depends on one thing to keep functioning: your ignorance. It relies on you believing that the paper in your wallet is money, and that the people in charge have a plan to fix this. But now, you know the truth. You have seen the map and the history. Seeing the trap is the first step to escaping it. You cannot stop the 80-year cycle. You cannot force the government to stop printing money. You cannot fix an empire that has decided to liquidate its own future. But you can stop participating in the illusion. The mental shift you need to make right now is simple but radical. Stop waiting for the system to save you. It was not built to save you, it was built to consume you. Stop thinking in terms of dollars, euros, or yen. Those are just measuring sticks that are shrinking every day. Start thinking in terms of value. The architects of this system are terrified of a population that understands the game. Because once you understand the game, you stop playing by their rules. You stop saving in a currency they can print for free. You start owning things they cannot print. You start building skills that no inflation can erode. You start protecting your family not with hope, but with hard assets. This transition from stage 5 to stage 6 is going to be turbulent and messy. History guarantees that. But for the prepared, it is also an opportunity. The British Empire fell, but the people who owned land, gold, and businesses survived. The Dutch Empire fell, but the merchants who understood value thrived. You are not a victim of this cycle, you are simply living through a changing of the guard. And now that you have the map, you can navigate the storm. History is a wheel. You can either be crushed under it, or you can learn to ride it. If this video turned on a light in a dark room for you, share this with one person you care about. One person you want to wake up before the clock strikes midnight. And if you are ready to take the next step, if you want to know exactly what to own when the dollar loses its crown, in the next video, we will look at the specific assets that have survived every stage 6 in history. We will look at the lifeboat that the wealthy have already built for themselves, and how you can get a seat on it. The clock is ticking. See you there.